Thank you so much for being here, especially given the change of schedule. And I'm just so thankful, with as busy as we all are, and the crazy Ohio weather, that it worked out. So thank you so much to my friend Jen. Thank you to my mom for being here, and many of my ministry ladies as well with Saint Gabriel Media, and for you as well. When I had a chance to meet with John and talk about today and what it is that you would have me share and he wanted me to talk about, we talked about my reversion story. And I think, like a lot of us, we feel like we've lived multiple lives. And so there were different topics that I could talk about. I traveled the country and talk about women's issues, pro-life, adoption, special needs. But in this case, he said, we want to hear your reversion story. And so that's a bit of what I'm going to share with you today. And I think it's fitting because 1 week from today, it's St. Valentine's Day. And this story is a love story. And I think, like so many of us in our lives, and that was also a little covert hint for the guys. By the way, it's 1 week from today. But St. Augustine said, to fall in love with God is the greatest adventure, to seek him the greatest romance, to find him the greatest human achievement. And having lived that, I want to just share a little bit of my own adventure and humble gift of being chased down by the hound of heaven, and also wanting to do something beautiful for God. I think that today, as I stand here now, that's what continues to push me forward. And that we're living in a time where more people need to fall in love like that. The world needs to be in love with our Lord. And it is up to us as carriers of the light to give that light and that love to others, no matter where we are. And that we all have to start, and just to begin. So I want to begin with giving some context of my own background and looking at Our Lady and Our Lady's yes. I also look to my mom and my mom's yes. And for my mom, that yes actually started in the convent. My mom, Joan, is here today, and she was, as a young woman, in the convent at Toledo with the Sisters of Notre Dame. And so she began there going to school, and then was an aspirant, and then a postulant, and then a novice. Did I get the order right? Okay. And after some time, there was an illness, and so she ended up leaving until that illness did resolve, and she could come back to the convent. But during that time, she actually met my dad. So there was no scandal there, but I am very glad that she met my dad. And that faith, that piety that she had there in the convent, she brought immediately and naturally to the vocation of wife and mother. And so when the sisters would gather at the stairs in the convent and they would, in scattered fashion, sing Marian hymns to Our Lady on the stairs, those Marian hymns she sang to me as a little girl. And that's the faith and the spirituality that I grew up being surrounded by. And it was a time that catechesis wasn't as much overtly taught as maybe just covertly taught and lived. We didn't, at the dinner table, even do the dinner prayer. We didn't talk about understanding the mysteries of the rosary and how to meditate. That wasn't something that I learned as a little girl. It was a different time. But my mom, from her first communion prayer book, that was my first debut on the mic, was at church. She taught me the old prayer, "Lovely lady dressed in blue, teach me how to pray. God was just your little boy, and you know the way," and that whole prayer. And so that was the first, and as a shy, very enclosed introvert, that was a big deal, but the first time being on the mic, and it was, I think, before or after Mass. So my mother and my grandmother very much had this beautiful faith that just enveloped everything they did. And so at a young age, for me, it was intimidating. Didn't feel like I had it. My mom ran across the story that I wrote when I was a little girl in elementary school, and it was a story about Dirt. And Dirt went to school, did not do very well, got in trouble. Dirt came home, got in trouble there. And it doesn't take a child psychologist to realize who the character Dirt was. That was me. So I didn't have a very high opinion of myself as a young child. And then in middle school can be really difficult. And I think in some ways it can be tougher than high school. And girls can be very cruel. So I was bullied in middle school, and that was a very tough time. And I don't know if you have said these words, but I know in my circles with the moms and the ladies I know, we have all uttered the words, "I am so glad there wasn't social media when we were growing up." And that's the truth. It was a really difficult time, and I so feel for our young people today and the world that they have to navigate with social media. And without that, just trying to figure out who you are, who God made you to be, where you fit. And when you're being bullied and when you're being surrounded and pulled in different directions, that's a really tough thing. So for me, that was a very tough time in my life. And I remember praying, we lived in Ohio, that either I could run away or that my dad, we would move. And it was like the heavens opened up and my dad got a job transfer and we were able to move to Wisconsin. So we lived in northeast Wisconsin, a little bit north of Green Bay. And it was the best thing that could have happened and like a divine deliverance for me. So in terms of my faith at the time, I think because of the struggles I had with self-esteem and self-worth, I started very early on to look for other things that I thought would bring me happiness. I felt, I don't think I have my mom's faith because I saw how it looked so easy for her. And I just thought maybe it's like genetic and I don't have that holy DNA gene. It skipped a generation. My grandma had it, my mom had it, but it was a struggle for me. And so I tried to find things that would bring me happiness. And so for me, what that looked like was to build on perfection in appearance, the gifts and my talents that God gave me, my social life, and I was successful at that. So the idea was then to build on that perfection. And at the age of 14, I was actually discovered. I was in a production, and then I was able to go and be in radio. And so really young in this business of media, learning a lot. And so that was it for me. I felt like all that bullying, that insecurity, this was my vindication. I was going to be famous, I was going to do great things, and I was going to show them that I was someone. And I think for so many of us, we can live our whole lives that way, where we're trying to prove ourselves. And that, for me, was where I was at then. And so it was there in this antiquated studio where I learned about radio and fell in love with the business. And there were 45 records. We played records and 8-track carts for commercials. And it was a bit of a hybrid format where we would play USA Radio News in the morning, and I would rip and read the content and the news. And then in the afternoon, it was country. I can remember Shania Twain. Who's this girl, Shania Twain? Well, it was Shania. And so I learned, and Garth Brooks. And then in the evening, it was classic rock. So I learned about, Iron Butterfly and Loggins and Messina and just music is a beautiful thing. So I fell in love with music and had great joy in that. And so radio was in my blood there. And there's a phrase that we often use in radio called theater of the mind. And that was it for me, that radio was poetry without the visual distraction. It's rhetoric, it's storytelling, it's connecting on a human level. And for someone like me who's shy, it's difficult to be in a room and navigate and really let your guard down. But when you're in radio and people are calling and they're vulnerable, it's very human to human. So I knew right away that that was it. And in other areas of my life, it started to get better. The girl that was bullied then became prom queen and popular, and I had all these great things, this great future. But with all of that, I was so empty inside, and I didn't get it because I thought if I fixed everything, then I should feel fulfilled. And that radio passion, the bright future, all the things that I had wanted to build. And so then a distance set in for me with my faith, and the more that I latched onto the culture and the idol of self and all that promises, then the more difficult time I had in other areas of my life. And I just determined again that I just maybe didn't have the same faith as my mother and my family, and that mine would be a different path. And of course, the longer you live and the more you know and you see, we can recognize right away that phrase from Augustine, our hearts are restless, O Lord, until they rest in you. And how restless are we? And for me at that stage, that was my chasing phase. And we are a stiff-necked people. Sometimes we don't get it, and we have to be taught again and again and again. And my mom, I remember at that time in my life, she tried so hard because I would have a radio gig on a Friday night and go out, and she'd say, well, there's confession on Saturday morning if you want to go, and are you going to join us for Mass? And it's hard as a parent, and I see that now as a mom of teenagers, where you want to just scream and tell them and show them every day of your life that you don't cry out to God in mercy and love and praise is a day that we're not fully alive. And that if you could just save our children from what we experienced. But again, we have to kind of learn, just as the Israelites did, just as generations have, that we have to discover Christ who lives within us. And so my mom's name is Joan, and she really is a warrior and prayed for me all of those years as well. And by the time I was 19, I had landed my first morning show gig. I was co-hosting a program at the #1 top 40 station, the largest market in Wisconsin. And so I thought, this is it. I'm not even 20. And I'm able to interview athletes and hang out with celebrities and really have a great financial stability to hang my hat on and a future to build. And when you live on your own and you're paying bills, though, it can be very humbling. And I missed my mom. I missed home. And I missed the traditions that I grew up with. And thank God for the traditions, the rituals, the devotions of our faith, because when I was floating in outer space, that was one of the few tethers that kept me, was I missed church. That's where I felt home, when I was alone and away from everything. So I began to go to church, and I was a lector. And I would go in and I would lecture on Sunday, and then on Monday morning, I would be the girl on the top 40 radio station talking about the same things Howard Stern talked about. This was the shock jock generation. And so as vulgar you could be, the better. But somehow we humans compartmentalize things. And we are in a moral, relativistic society that says, hey, this is just something that we're talking about, and we can justify, we're adults, we can make our own decisions. And so I wasn't getting it. And if I were to go back and say anything or to offer anything to you now, I would say it is a gift and an act of love to charitably reach out to someone that you know is being self-destructive. No one at that time, because I thought they heard me talk about church. I talked about volunteering at a nursing home. I had made friends with a nun, and I would visit with her. And then I would, on the same breath, talk about something terrible, the hookup culture, whatever it would be. And not one person said, hey, I thought you were a Christian, or emailed me, or at that time it was letters. So I'm dating myself because they would send letters to the radio station. And we began to get emails, but no one ever said anything. And I think sometimes we all need that kind of proverbial slap or that cold shower to wake us up. What are you doing? Because I wasn't able to see. I didn't have eyes to see at that time. And it didn't happen there for me where I came back to my faith quite yet, and I was still miserable. So all of these exciting things were happening. And it should have been, what the culture says, is the apex. This is it. You could really have everything at a young age, and I was miserable. And I thought, you know what, I need a man. That's what it is. I think if I get married, I find the man, then all of this yearning and this aching is going to be filled. And so, thank God I did. I met this Southern gentleman in the Army, and he's with me today here, 18 years later, almost 19. And he was Southern Baptist. I was Catholic. We both loved the Lord. As misguided maybe as we were in our faith, there was a genuine foundation that was built there. So that was a good start. But what happened is, without being really tethered to the faith or understanding what it meant to live a truly Catholic life, and our Catholicity, is we just began filling in the blanks. What is the perfect American couple supposed to do? What movies are we supposed to watch? What neighborhood are we supposed to live in? What cars are we supposed to drive? When we have children, where are they supposed to go to school? And so he would go to church with me, ask me, why do we kneel so much? I couldn't really explain it, right? I had received all my sacraments, all the catechesis. And for all of that, my interior life, there was poverty there. And so I couldn't explain it to him. We would go to an evangelical church. Well, we'll have our baby dedicated at the evangelical church and also baptized at the Catholic church. We didn't know. And so it all full circle came around back to radio here in Cleveland, Ohio, where years later we were able to move home, and I got a job after Robin Swoboda retired. And I was just looking for a part-time gig, and we were moving. I had left the radio station in Green Bay where I worked. And they said, well, Robin is leaving. Would you be interested? And Sue Wilson, at the time, also Catholic, working at this evangelical Protestant radio station, said, would you be interested in the morning show? I was not where I should have been in my faith, but I loved Christian music. I was listening to Christian music. I loved Michael Card and Third Day and Amy Grant and Michael W. Smith, so I knew the format. And thank God for the listeners then when I began working at the Fish who reached out to me and said, do you really believe that you're eating Jesus, the body and blood of Christ? And do you really believe that the Pope is God on earth? And do you really worship Mary? all of these questions that I had never confronted. I had children that I was raising in the Catholic faith, and I couldn't answer these questions. I had never thought about it. And these listeners were genuinely concerned for my soul, but I'm grateful for that because they challenged me, and it was a Christ-like challenge. Sometimes it was critical, but it was also in a way of, what do you believe? Do you know what you believe? Have you really stopped to think about it? Have you studied your faith? And so that, to me, was the fire that lit the rocket ship. And there was a great Pentecost in my life, in the hour commute that I had every day, waking up at 2 a.m. for 10 years, driving in, listening to Catholic radio every day, all day. Father Leo Clifford, Mother Angelica, Jesse Romero, at that time, Father John Carapi, you name it, Dr. Ray Garundi, everyone I had memorized, Father John Ricardo, and what they had to say. And my prayers, the rosary, for the first time in my life, I was weeping, meditating on the sorrowful mystery. It changed everything. I fell in love. The sky was bluer, the grass was greener, everything made sense. And when you're working at a radio station, especially a Christian one, people reach out often in their most desperate times because they have nowhere else to call. And I need a prayer, and I just heard someone's voice on this Christian radio station, or I just heard this song, and I just left hospice and my dad died, and I need to call, and someone needs to pray over me. And so when someone calls you and they're looking for answers, we ought to have answers for them. And so that, because of that challenge, made me want to do something beautiful for God. I don't just want to be a Christian, I want to be on fire. And I want to take the love and the beauty of our faith, the richness and deepness of our faith that has been deposited in me, and now that it's activated, it is my responsibility. Woe to us should we not, in every encounter that we have, pass that on to others. And so the prayers in my car, it became my roving chapel. And every day, going home and going to work, these prayers, I would lift up these petitions of the listeners and be able, with apologetics, to say, yes, the body and blood of Christ is the source and summit of our faith, the real presence, the Eucharist. Jesus enthroned in the adoration is the most beautiful thing. To be able to finally explain why we make the sign of the cross, the power of the sign of the cross. And if you've ever had that happen, you know you're never going to be the same. And Father Arupe has a beautiful poem about that, Fall in Love. It changes everything, what you watch. And then it finally dawned on me, Lord, forgive me, I cannot believe all the things that I talked about, how much error I spewed on the radio to people. I had to make reparation for that and to ask for forgiveness and confession. I didn't even know all those years the sins that I was committing. Children listened to our radio station, and I took pride because it was entertainment. And so thank God for the ability to create something beautiful with our lives and for God's mercy as well. But it takes work. So I guess that's one of the messages I just want to leave, is that with our faith, just like our physical bodies, our relationships with our spouses, our friends, everything takes work. There is no quick fix to our faith, because with my mom, I just thought she was born with this great, like Padre Pio, this piety, but she had to work at it. She has suffered great loss. She has suffered desolation. She has suffered, as we all have, but she works at it every day of her life. And as we have to work at our waistline and our health, we must work at our faith. Father Leo Clifford says, when we know by faith that God is living with us, there is no challenge we cannot face, no burden we cannot carry. When we realize we are never alone, we are not lost in a crowd, that he is loving you with a love for which there are no words. The world needs to know this. He has been so good to us. When I look back on my life, I see the goodness of God in 1,000 ways, proving his love for me. How could I not be loving to others? Understanding, compassionate, making allowances for their weaknesses as the Lord makes allowances for mine all the time. So when I look at my mom with her apron and her folded hands and her rosary over her folded hands, it's with a lifetime of work that she has put in. And as parents, we sacrifice a lot for our children. We want to give them and strive better than what we had and to give them the best opportunities. But there is no thing better than giving them the best of our faith and who we are. I don't have a rich Italian uncle that's going to leave me a great inheritance. I'm not going to inherit, some great fortune, but boy, the pearl of great price in our faith is the greatest gift, greatest, that will not perish, that will not be defiled. And this foundation will sustain, it has me, my children, through a bad breakup, a bad grade, because we are in a world where, thank God, mental health issues are becoming much more prevalent and discussed. But there's also the poverty of the soul as well. And teaching our children to see how God sees. I didn't know that when I called myself dirt. It took years, but with my mom's prayers and grace and working at it, that it became clear. And once we know that, there is nothing we cannot do. And that's what I love about the stories of the saints. We see it every day. When we give our yes, our fiat, that we better buckle up. So after this journey, and finally saying, Lord, I'm here. I am all in now. And I want to do something beautiful for you. And when you say that, that's a very dangerous prayer because you really have to be ready. And so for us in our situation, and this is a whole other story that I travel and talk about, it was our journey to our daughter Carolina. And just to give you the abbreviated version, we were invited to Mount Vernon with Newt and Callista Gingrich to watch a film called 9 Days That Changed the World. And it's about Pope John Paul's historic visit to Poland in 1979 and the subsequent fall of communism, more specifically the devotion of Our Lady of Czestochowa and John Paul II's love of the Black Madonna. And so that began a series of events that led us to our daughter. At that time, we had 3 boys. We had several miscarriages, years of secondary infertility, but also working at the Fish, adoption and the pro-life movement was very vibrant, still is. And Stephen Curtis Chapman, for instance, a Christian music artist that has done so much to raise awareness of the beauty of adoption. And we say we're pro-life, but let's live it, let's do it. And so, Lord, I'm all in. Let's do it. Let's adopt. And so he sent us all the way to Poland. It could have been any city. It could have been a foster family. It could have been a government-run agency. It was this little orphanage in Czestochowa, Poland, just blocks away from the shrine of Jasna Góra, where Our Lady of Czestochowa is, and our beautiful daughter, Carolina. But as we know as Christians, when we are given this great mission and the Lord, the God of the covenant who sends us out, we don't just ride into the sunset in a happy ever after. That's of course, our ultimate everlasting glory. Usually it's a valley of tears. So it wasn't this happy ending where now I can say, and now she's at Harvard. She is severely autistic, and she has special needs, and we'll probably be caring for her for the rest of our lives, but it is the greatest gift that I never could have imagined all those years ago. I think for all of us, if we were to look back as children and look at our lives, we'd say, I never saw that coming. I never thought it would quite turn out this way. But oh, how God loves us, and it's a reminder that we are not in control. And so the sooner that we surrender and we open up our hands, the sooner he's able to come in and to take us where he wants to lead us. And so as I conclude, I just wanted to share that no matter where we are, God's work is vital and powerful. After years of ecumenical outreach at the Fish, and early on those letters, and really up until I left, I would get every month, I got an anonymous package in the mail, and it didn't have a return address, but it was always filled with pamphlets that said how the Catholic Church was evil. And these are all these different proofs and facts, but I had no way to combat it. I was like, bring it on, I want to have a dialogue. And that's okay, because these years, the efforts that we made at the Fish were extraordinary. Where my partner, my co-host Len Hauser, was able to work with Father Bob Steck, who's done amazing things, and with the Fish, a mostly evangelical radio station, then creating the largest free Catholic festival in the United States because of the efforts of Father Bob in this amazing community of not just Catholics, but also Protestants, and a great ecumenical family effort. And so that took years, and after 10 years, Lord, you've made me a missionary, then feeling the call to come home. And I kind of laugh because I have 5 children, and when I was at the Fish, at the height of our listenership, it's called CUME, and that's how many people might sample your station on an average morning. 500,000, 500,000 people every morning that would tune in. And I took that, and like as a holy fool, I left because a lot of people said, why are you leaving after all these years? My children needed me, my daughter needed me, my husband. And now every morning I just have 5 kids that tune me out. So it's a very different scenario. But it is something I wouldn't change for all the world because it is the greatest gift. And I know they hear. Just as God knows we hear. It might take us a while. But so a few takeaways for me. I guess the biggest thing that I would offer is about just doing something beautiful for God. And John Henry, soon to be saint, John Henry Cardinal Newman says, God has created me to do him some definite purpose. If I am in sickness, my sickness will serve him. If I am in perplexity, my perplexity will serve him. He does nothing in vain. I created a blog called The Sacred Sink. That sink is my home altar. It is where I pray. It is where I shed tears. It is where I cry out to the Lord. And that is no less holy than if I am somewhere else praying in a shrine. And of course, shrines and holy places have beautiful graces. But where the Lord places our feet, whether we're 15 or 85, we are no less potent. And as I train for a marathon and I'm reminded that we have got to be conditioned always, life isn't going to get easier, it will get harder. And that no matter what stage we're in, God has work for us to do, that we can create something beautiful. Whether we are in a nursing home, whether we are in a Fortune 500 company, whether we are in a home caring for a special needs child, there is power there. And it's not about the ascent and how high can I get, it's what is down here that I'm missing. Who needs me? Mother Teresa went and picked up those being eaten alive by maggots in the gutter. That's where the Lord was, the beauty that she built for him. And of course, he is in the boardroom. He is everywhere. But wherever you are, it is you to be the hands and feet, the voice and the heart of our Lord. Recapture wonder. Today we see in our modern era more images in one day of our lives. Think about all the images from the time you wake up, the digital clock, to your television, to your radio, than a medieval commoner saw in their entire lifetime. So when they went to Mass and they saw stained glass windows, and they saw the frescoes and the wooden altar and the high ceiling, they were dazzled. They didn't see images like this. They couldn't even understand the language, the Mass, most of the commoners. But this image put them in rapture. We're a tough crowd these days. We go into the most beautiful churches and we barely blink and we hardly lip sync our songs. And I went to Haiti and had a chance to meet a woman who had lost everything. And when she saw us coming, she cried, she sang. Food for the Poor, who I was with, helped build her a home. All by us, it was a hovel. All she had were those 4 walls. But there was wonder and joy and zeal that every day that we can be awakened to. When you wake up in the morning and your car starts, act surprised. Thank you, Lord, my car started. We're literally in that situation with our very decrepit van. But, we kind of take for granted after we get to a certain, things are going to happen. We're going to get out of bed and our legs are going to move. Everything is a miracle because we are not in control of those things. And so it's a powerful thing to be quickened to. And again, to work at our faith. I had a chance to meet a woman, a listener, who was really upset because her son had been sentenced to a sentence in prison for selling drugs. And she was a pastor's wife, and this was devastating to her. And she said, everything I've ever given, all the faith that I've deposited, and I'm humiliated. And she shared with me that a few months after he was in prison and she was able to go and visit him, she began to teach the other inmates how to read. And so for the first time in their life, these men had a ticket, a confidence, an ability to see themselves as God sees them. I have worth. She's investing, she's helping me read. That wouldn't have happened if she hadn't said, I'm going to do something beautiful for God and find meaning in this circumstance. And so no matter where we are, we can do that, where God puts us. As I wrap up, I would just like to conclude with a message of love for our Holy Mother Church, to take pride in our Catholic faith. We are not in easy times right now. We know that. And so I think sometimes when we hear the word Catholic, depending on where we hear it or what crowd we're in, we can kind of hang our head a little bit. Yet, when they pick a new pope, the whole world is Catholic. Everybody's cheering and shouting. We're looking for that white smoke. News reporters are coming in. And you feel this pride. Yes, I am Catholic. I know we've all felt that sometime in our, yes, thank you, Lord. I'm Catholic and I'm proud. We need to recapture that and show the world that being Catholic is so beautiful. We're giving them Jesus, the Eucharist. And so I wrote a little rap. It's more of a rhyme. I realize I'm a middle-aged white woman standing up here trying to rap, but it is more of a rhyme, and I just wanted to share it in conclusion as I wrap up about the beauty of our faith as a reminder for all of us here today. I have to psych myself up sometimes. Okay, here we go. We live in an age of yeah, whatever, where people don't stop and think about forever. They diss the church, take God's name in vain, find their identity in Facebook and seeking fame. But we are called to greater. A new day awaits. We've been invited to the banquet of the communion of the saints. It's called being Catholic, and it's a powerful gift filled with supernatural graces, so be proud of it. Pope Francis, Peter, St. Bartholomew, Mary, Joseph, Jesus, and death he overthrew. The sacraments, the Eucharist, the Catholic faithful, and that includes you. Augustine, Maximilian, Teresa, and Aquinas, these are the saints in a family that defines us. Great art of history, the Rosary, all 5 mysteries, the Trinity, Advent, Lent, the High Mass Latin liturgy. Our faith has spanned the ages, and our monks have written the pages of the greatest story ever told, and a man named Jesus, his birth foretold. He is the key to everlasting glory, and he founded the Catholic Church, and that is part of your story. So be proud and stand tall and show the world who you are, a Christian with passion. Be a Catholic rock star. Okay, that's it.